attention to the fact that proceedings are being made accessible for people who are deaf or hearing impaired. The interpreters are using British Sign Language, and Parliament TV is showing a live simultaneous interpretation of the debate. Order, order. Liz Twist to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Austin. It's an honour to serve under your chairmanship today. I beg to move the debate on e-petition 200,000 relating to BSL being part of the national curriculum. Mr Austin, last September, I had the pleasure of meeting Erin, a young woman involved in the National Deaf Children's Society. Erin told me very clearly that many young people, like herself, who are deaf, feel very strongly that British Sign Language should be taught in schools, and what's more, that it should become a GCSE subject, so that more young people are able to learn BSL and it would be recognised properly as a language qualification, equal to other GCSEs. Erin's determination and her clear explanation of why this should be so made a lasting impression on me. So when this petition, started by Wayne Barrows here today, came before the Petitions Committee, I was keen to speak on it and put the petition forward on behalf of Wayne and the many other petitioners, and on behalf of Erin. Honourable members who are my colleagues on the Petitions Committee were very conscious that while it had not reached 100,000 signatures, which is the normal position, it's an issue which should be considered by this House, and asking people to achieve 100,000 signatures when less than that figure speak BSL, have BSL as their first language. And the Petitions Committee was also very keen that the debate should be signed so that deaf young people, and the not so young, could see the debate as it happens. A first for a live debate in this House, and I hope the first of many as Parliament reaches out and becomes more inclusive. Thank you to our signers and to the committee and the House staff who made this possible. And what a day, colleagues, to be holding this debate when the British film, The Silent Child, last night won the Oscar for Best Live Action Short Film. And the acceptance speech by actress Rachel Shenton was signed. Another achievement and another step forward. I will.
Who's making a very powerful speech. And Maisie Sly, who was the 5-year-old actress who is profoundly deaf, who appeared in that film, is one of my constituents. And the school that she goes to, the mainstream state school, have embraced sign language, and it has really inspired lots of young people who want to go and take that up. And as the former Minister for Disabled People, we have a chronic shortage of BSL interpreters in this country, and if we can tap into the inspiration, we can then solve more problems, as well as helping people like Maisie, who we are very, very proud of in Swindon.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention and for the information about the school, which I'm sure is a good example to many others.
Will the Honourable Member be quick?
I will.
Thank you, you're very kind. I just wanted to come in on that point and say that whilst I was training to become a primary school teacher during the early 2000s, I actually completed placement in a mainstream primary school that had fully embraced integration of all children. Teachers spoke with a special microphone that was tuned into the children's implants, and every session was signed. All children benefited. I benefited as a teacher. Everyone benefits from this. I was also going to say, again, huge congratulations to Rachel Shenton and to Maisie. What an amazing achievement. And let's hope we see plenty more signing going on in Parliament in every debate.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. It is indeed a good example, and one which I will touch on later, the idea that everyone benefits from BSL and from signing. So, as I was saying yesterday, the film The Silent Child won the Oscar, and starring 6-year-old Maisie Sly, as my honourable friend has mentioned, and Rachel Shenton, it tells the story of a 4-year-old profoundly deaf girl who struggles to communicate until she learnt to communicate by sign language. I feel sure that all members will want to join me in sending our congratulations to Maisie, Rachel and the team who produced the film. Yeah. Now all I have to do is to follow that. So on to the petition itself. The petitioners ask for BSL to be part of the national curriculum. They point out that about 50,000 people in the UK use BSL, that many children are born deaf, and that they should be given a better chance to a more integrated future. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I commend her for securing this debate. Deaf children should be able to interact with their peers as much as those children who can hear. Does she agree with me that a simple solution to make our education system truly inclusive will be for the Department of Education to include British Sign Language in the national curriculum for all schools and all children?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention, and I do indeed agree with that statement and hope to explain some more why that is the case. So, as I was saying, the petitioners want to see BSL to be part of the national curriculum and give a better chance to people who, to young people who are deaf. They believe that if BSL becomes part of the national curriculum, that it will even up the chances of deaf young people being able to play a full part in school and have the best chance of attaining the best they can at school. So let us look at the case. Research by the National Deaf Children's Society into attainment for deaf children in 2017 shows that deaf children continue to underachieve compared to other children throughout their education. While the Department for Education claimed recently that attainment for deaf children is at an all-time high, the latest figures show that the attainment gap between deaf children and children with no identified special needs is widening, with the gap at GCSE level being particularly worrying. In 2016, 41.3% deaf children achieved the expected GCSE benchmark of 5 GCSEs at A star to C grade, compared with 69.3% of children with no identified special needs achieving that target, a difference of 22.6%. This is just not acceptable in this day and age. All of this is in the context of a reduction of 14% in the number of qualified teachers of the deaf since 2011, and a 2% reduction just in 1 year, 2016-17. So that we know that we have to do more to help deaf pupils achieve their full potential, and that we need to reverse the reduction in the number of teachers of the deaf. Part of that is by making sure that young deaf pupils are able to have effective communication, and for many that will be through BSL. BSL is a recognised language and has been recognised since 2003. However, unlike other languages, it's not recognised as a GCSE, which can be taught in schools. I will.
Way. In Hartlepool, there are many initiatives to promote inclusion and the use of BSL. Will my honourable friend agree with me that BSL should at least be offered as part of the curriculum?
I do agree with my honourable friend. It's very important that that should be the case. So a pilot GCSE has been trialled and it is ready to go, but the DFE is refusing to give it the go-ahead. And I would ask the Minister at this stage to talk to his colleagues in other departments and work with them to agree to this GCSE being agreed and being available to students. The absence of a GCSE and BSL with the same status as other GCSEs discourages schools from teaching sign language in schools, a view supported by the survey run by an organisation called Signature, which I'll talk about shortly. But the point of making BSL a national curriculum subject is more than exams. It's about the whole young person, making sure that they're able to play a full part in school activities, getting on with their peers, and able to have a full life in school and out of school. I will.
Is my friend aware that there are 23,000 children aged under 15 that suffer from deafness, and if BSL is taught in schools, it will also increase inclusion of those children and help others understand what it is to be deaf, and therefore help the social cohesion in the school for all pupils.
I do agree very strongly with the point that the Honourable Member makes. It's really important that deaf children are able to take part fully in the life of the school. So I talked about a survey by signature carried out on behalf of the National Deaf Children's Society's Youth Advisory Board, made up of people like Erin and other young people like her from across the UK, who believe strongly that there should be more opportunities for young people, deaf or hearing, to learn BSL, an officially recognised language in the UK. In 2016 and 17, they carried out a survey of over 2,000 young people, of which 700 were deaf and 1,400 were hearing. This survey showed that 91% of young people want to learn sign language, 92% think that schools should offer BSL GCSE, and 97% of young people think BSL should be taught in schools. Their reasons for wanting this were inclusivity, making sure that deaf people are fully integrated into society and not disadvantaged because others can't communicate with them effectively. The importance of communication in general. Equality. They likened BSL to learning French or Spanish and thought BSL was at least equally important. Being able to use BSL, they thought, can help with employment prospects both directly or indirectly, but many of them didn't know of anywhere where they could learn BSL at no or little cost. I've already mentioned the shortage of qualified teachers of the deaf, but there is a wider shortage. In 2017, the Department of Work and Pensions highlighted shortages in sign language interpreters, resulting in higher costs for government programmes such as access to work and making it harder for deaf people to enter the workplace. A GCSE could lead to more people consider interpreting for deaf people as a career. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to make this petition downbeat. There are some amazing young people and older people getting out there, making the case for BSL and other measures to improve inclusivity. Since this debate was announced, a number of young people, not just young people, have contacted me to tell me about the work that they are doing. People like Catherine Robinson, who runs Signs for Success, teaching very young children to sign so that they're able to communicate from their earliest days and don't face the isolation which can come with deafness. She believes that children, all children, not just those who are deaf, can benefit from learning to sign. People like Erin and other young people from the National Deaf Children's Society who are out there campaigning on this issue. As you do these days, colleagues, I Googled Wayne and had a look at his Twitter feed and saw the site which Wayne and his friend Lisa J have, signing and singing pop songs. Actually, Wayne assures me that he doesn't sing because he can't, but he signs along to pop songs. So this debate and this petition is about BSL helping young people to have fun as well as learning. So, you know, it's not just all serious stuff. I was also contacted by a young constituent of mine from Blaydon, I won't give her name, who told me about her experiences at school. And it wasn't an easy experience. But she is out there too, pushing for more people to learn BSL. We need to make sure that deaf young people have the best chance they can. And this petition is one way of making sure that we make progress in this area. And I have to say that it's about time, perhaps, that some of us MPs had a go at learning BSL. And I am sure that we could arrange classes in this place. I'm sure that it's achievable, and I will commit to putting my name down to learn. And I know many other members will join me. So turning to the government response to this petition, one of the great things about petitions is that you do see the government's response, and you may have seen it on the website. So we know what the Minister may be going to say, though I very much hope he will be much bolder in what he is prepared to say today about this proposal to include BSL in the national curriculum. I'm sure other honourable members will be asking him to do the same in good time. So basically what the government has said is schools can already do it. It doesn't need to be part of the national curriculum. We have no plans to change it. Well, yes, Minister, we know that schools can do it, but we all know, those of us who have been teachers or governors or just parents, know that the school timetable is already under huge pressure. And without that additional push, it, in most cases, just won't happen. We know from the survey I mentioned that young people are keen and willing to learn BSL. We need the government to help to make it happen and to make it a part of the curriculum. And one of the comments made, which I have to say a number of people have said to me that they took a bit of exception to, is that BSL is not just a useful tool. It's an essential part of communication with the outside world and with other people. So it's an essential tool to many of our young people and one we should respect. So in winding up, I asked the Minister to push the boat out a bit and give a positive response to this request to make BSL part of the national curriculum and give our deaf young people the best chance they can have. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered e-petition 200,000 relating to British Sign Language being part of the national curriculum. And I'll call Peter Aldous.
Thank you very much, Mr Austin. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Blaydon for her work in facilitating this debate. It is either coincidental or a subliminal message from another place that this debate is taking place on the same day that The Silent Child won an Oscar. I've not seen it, but I understand that sign language is the means by which a whole new world is opened up for Libby, the 4-year-old who is the star of the story. In the same way, if BSL is part of the national curriculum and there is a GCSE in sign language, a whole new world can be opened up for thousands of deaf and hard of hearing young children and adults around the UK. Later this month, I shall be accompanying Daniel Gillings from Lowestoft and his mother Anne to meet the Minister at his very kind invitation, so that they can explain why a GCSE in sign language is so important to them. Anne has highlighted to me that BSL is the first language of deaf children, and it is discriminatory that they do not have the opportunity to achieve what is the most widely recognised qualification in their first language, and that it is given a lower status than other languages. It is accepted that there are other accredited qualifications in BSL, but they are not widely available to children in schools, and they are less likely to be recognised by employers. Daniel achieved his BSL Level 1 3 years ago. It was not funded, and Anne tutored him herself and paid for all the assessments herself. Mr Austin, this is not right. There is a compelling case for a GCSE in BSL. Firstly, on the grounds of equality. Many other languages are quite rightly taught at GCSE: Arabic, Biblical Hebrew, Persian and Urdu. It is right that they are in an outward-looking pluralistic country, but the deaf and the hard of hearing must be placed on the same level playing field. Secondly, the continuing absence of a GCSE in BSL is a denial of choice. A survey by the National Deaf Children's Society's Youth Advisory Board found that 92% of young people who are deaf or hard of hearing think that schools should offer a BSL in GCSE. Finally, its continuing non-availability puts up a barrier for many young people initially to further and higher education and thereafter entry into the workplace. Mr Austin, a barrier was taken down in Hollywood last night as Rachel Shenton used BSL in her Oscar acceptance speech, and I look forward to meeting the Minister with Daniel and Anne later this month so that we can begin work on taking down a barrier in Westminster. Thank you.
Jim Fitzpatrick.
Mr Austin, it's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon, and I'm also grateful to the Petitions Committee and my honourable friend for Blaydon for the opportunity to debate this issue, and I'm very pleased to see that the proceedings are being broadcast live with full British Sign Language interpretation. I should record that I wear 2 hearing aids of my own, My hearing was damaged in my time in London Fire Brigade, but I'm sure age is contributing also now. And I am chair of the all-party parliamentary group on deafness. The last debate secured here by the all-party group was on November the 30th, which was also signed but not live, which in itself was a parliamentary first. And there were excellent speeches from many colleagues. But this is the first debate with simultaneous translation for the live feed, and I understand it's been somewhat of a challenge to make it possible, so I congratulate the House authorities and the Petition Committee for ensuring that this has happened today. The November 30th debate was wide-ranging, Mr Austin. This opportunity is specific to British Sign Language and making it part of the national curriculum. The APPG has been trying to identify which minister and which government department we should speak to about this important matter. I submitted a parliamentary question on September the 11th last year to the Cabinet Office asking just that, but the answer wasn't very clear. Subsequently, we've chased the Cabinet Office, the Department for Work and Pensions, the Department for Education, the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and the Department of Health for clarification. It now seems to be clear that the Department for Work and Pensions is the lead department apparently on deafness, because deafness is a disability, which is some logic. So I need to ask the Minister what discussions he has had with ministerial colleagues at DWP about the prospect of a British Sign Language GCSE, because as he knows, DFE have already piloted and have a GCSE ready to go, but government won't give it the green light. So one has to ask why, and perhaps the Minister can explain in the wind-ups whether this is a DWP decision or a Department for Education decision. Scotland has led the way in this with the passing of the BSL Act in 2015, and in 2016 Northern Ireland launched its consultation. The Welsh Government is now consulting and introducing BSL to their curriculum, so England seems to be lagging behind. In UK terms, however, BSL was officially recognised as a language in its own right by the Department of Work and Pensions in 2003. In 2009, the UK Government ratified the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which states, among other things, that we should uphold such rights by recognising and promoting the use of sign language. Having said that, Mr Austin, I do think there's a small conflict here between the title of the petition and the words that people are being asked to sign. The first, the title says, Petition, make British Sign Language part of the national curriculum. And the second, the words say, this is why BSL needs to be taught in schools. The National Deaf Children's Society have reiterated their position on a BSL GCSE. They do not believe it has to be a mandatory part of the national curriculum, but if it would be easier for the DFE, that the department should simply approve the GCSE in British Sign Language, which has already been piloted. This would make it an option for schools should they deem it appropriate. DFE seems to be refusing to give it the go-ahead due to a blanket policy on no new GCSEs. NDCS reinforced their view from a variety of positions. On equality, if we can teach Turkish, Japanese and Russian, and my honourable friend came up with some even more obscure examples, but not British Sign Language, it implies that BSL has a lower status and importance. Surely this could be demonstrated to be discriminatory if it came to the courts. On denial of choice, thousands of young people deaf and hearing would choose this subject, but they don't get a chance. On discouraging teaching BSL, no GCSE deters teachers as it has reduced status. On reducing options for young people, and on supporting wider government initiatives. We've already heard that it's accepted from a DWP 2017 report. We have a shortage of registered deaf interpreters, resulting in higher costs for such services and making it harder for deaf people to enter the workforce. So the questions for the Minister are, Mr Austin, if the department has a ready-to-go GCSE, why not authorise it? Why encourage schools to teach BSL without affording them the chance to benchmark their performances? Why offer GCSE equivalents in the form of NVQs, but not GCSE itself? I think and I suspect that NDCS also believe that the strongest of these points is the first. the question of whether the decision not to support a BSL GCSE is discriminatory. I think they promote it first as it is a matter of law, and were a case to come before the courts, the government should be forced to act. I don't think the government should be forced to act. I think it should do so voluntarily. It should not be embarrassed or shamed by Edinburgh, Cardiff or Belfast dragging its feet on these matters. It is, in my view, not only doing a great disservice to deaf English school children, it is much, much more. It's tantamount to insulting them. To the thousands upon thousands of youngsters for whom British Sign Language is one of their primary methods of communication with each other and the world, Parliament is saying not only is Turkish, Japanese and Russian more important, so is Chinese, Greek and Portuguese more important than their language. I have to ask the Minister, who he knows is held in high regard across the House for his integrity and his honesty. Are we sure about this? I'm sure the Minister will not want to give a negative response to this question, but equally, I will be very surprised if he can say anything positive on this today. I'll say more than surprised. I'll be delighted if he can say something more positive on this today. However, the least I hope the Minister can do would be agree to take the matter back to the Department, discuss it with ministerial colleagues and try again. The all-party parliamentary group, officers and deaf organisations have a meeting with him on this subject, as he knows, next Monday afternoon, where we will be pressing our case home again at that point. In conclusion, Mr Austin, I'm grateful for another opportunity to raise this issue. I'm sure the Minister knows it will not go away. The Government, I think, recognises not only the inconsistency of its position, not only the unfairness in the provision, but the positive opportunities a change of policy would offer. I look forward to the day when we hear such a change. Today would be great, Minister. Next Monday would do also, but soon, Minister, please, soon.
Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. In 2015, Samsung produced this advert called Hearing Hands. And in this advert, a whole town learns sign language and it allows them to communicate with this deaf man. And it's incredibly moving because you see as he enters every shop, people are signing back to him, people are communicating with him. And this helps break down the barriers and makes him feel part of that wider society. And I challenge anybody here not to watch that advert and feel a little choked up and moved by it, and not to feel inspired that that is exactly the kind of society that we should have. That is exactly what we would want our world to be like. And the slogan for their advertising campaign was, "A world without barriers is our dream too." And surely that should be the dream of the government and, of course, the opposition. And I should mention other companies are available too. The Equalities Act, brought in by the last Labour government, has done a huge amount to improve the lives of deaf people. But there is still a long way to go, and we are in desperate need of more people to learn British Sign Language to get to the stage where we want to be at. Now, schools have the power to create an almost perfect example, an almost microclimate of what our society should be, welcoming and inclusive for everyone. And they can play a massive role in improving people's knowledge of British Sign Language and helping to create a helping hands society. And as a primary teacher, I learnt the not very much, very limited amount of sign language, and I will definitely be joining my honourable friend in learning more about this, because it helps to broaden and open up the way that you can communicate with so many more people. And although British Sign Language is recognised as a language in the UK, it's not available as a GCSE that can be taught in schools. Now, during the Labour conference recess last year, I met with the National Deaf Children's Society, who told me that a GCSE in British Sign Language has already been piloted and is ready to go. Now, our children could already have the option, yes, of learning British Sign Language in schools, but the Department for Education is refusing to give the GCSE the go-ahead. And I completely agree with the points that's been made as to when a teacher's supposed to teach it if it's not part of the national curriculum. We already know what is happening to personal and social and health education. It's getting squeezed out to nothing. So even if they said, oh, it's something you could do, how many schools, even if they desperately want to, have the time or the capacity to actually do it? So I want to use my contribution today to call on the government to rethink its approach and make sure that the GCSE qualification is made available as soon as possible. Because not allowing British Sign Language to be taught as a GCSE alongside other languages, many of whom have been mentioned already, implies that it has a lower status and a lower importance than those other languages. And it is hard already for deaf children to feel included when their key way of communicating is not recognised in the curriculum as a GCSE. And there are already loads of GCSEs available on so many subjects, and we're not even asking for British Sign Language to be made compulsory. And while there are, yes, other British Sign Language qualifications students can take, the league table obsessed, data obsessed, exam filled, narrowed, fear-driven schooling curriculum that this government has encouraged for the last 8 years mean they are less likely to be offered in schools because they are not GCSEs. Our examination system, our country's examination system, shows to the world what we value. It stands out there and says, this is what we value because this is what this is what we examine, this is what we count. And the exclusion of British Sign Language from any of those measures is a damning indication of what this government holds in high regard. Because British Sign Language is not a GCSE, it will be seen as having lower status not only by other people, other teachers in the schools, but also by employers. And this makes it harder for deaf children to be able to evidence their full abilities and puts them at a massive disadvantage compared to their peers who are not deaf. But it's not just deaf children who want a GCSE in British Sign Language. The National Deaf Children's Society surveyed lots of different children in 2016 and found that 9 out of 10 young people who weren't deaf agreed that British Sign Language should be offered as a GCSE in schools. This is because they recognise the wider societal benefits that everybody learning British Sign Language could have. Now, my church, the Tower Hill Methodist Church in Hessel, has a volunteer called Kathy who signs all of our services for us. And this has allowed more people to join our community and more people to come to our services. And that's just one example of how British Sign Language allows you to communicate with more people, make new friendships and new experiences that enriches everybody's lives. And outside the Department for Education, the government, I'm sure, must recognise the wider society benefits of British Sign Language too, because the Department for Work and Pension issued a report last year highlighted the shortage in signers, in language interpreters, resulting in higher costs for the government programmes, such as access to work. A British Sign Language GCSE could lead to more people considering interpreting as a career and so help address these issues. The barriers in place to British Sign Language being recognised as part of the curriculum are unfair, they restrict choice and they stand in the way of a much wider societal benefit. A GCSE in British Sign Language has already been piloted and is already ready to go, but it cannot be studied. Why? Political choice, showing again what the government values and what it does not. A world without barriers should be everybody's dream, and this government has it in its power the ability to make a small step towards creating that world, that fictional world that was played on the television on all those adverts in 2015. So I ask the Minister to listen to other honourable members and me and give British Sign Language a GCSE. Thank you.
Rachel Maskell.
I just started signing at the start of my speech, creating a barrier for everybody that didn't sign, because I wanted to make the point that for 70,000 people in our country, British Sign Language is their first language. And therefore it's really important to understand how we create barriers and disable people. People aren't disabled apart from by the barriers we create for them. I do want to also thank my honourable friend, the member for Blaydon, in the way that she opened today's debate. Now today, there's 3 things that I want to tell. The story about why I learned sign language. Secondly, how BSL should be in the national curriculum and why that's really important. And third, I want to ask the Minister some questions. So first of all, can I also thank the interpreters for their work today? So the reason I began learning sign language, because my neighbours were profoundly deaf. We would write notes to one another in exchange, but I never got to know them that well. We had barriers between us. They couldn't verbalise and I couldn't sign. And I questioned myself, who was creating the barrier here? And therefore took it upon myself to say, actually, I've got responsibility in this to learn how to break those barriers. So that was the first reason. Secondly, I was a physiotherapist, and I was in a school where children were signing, and they were teaching me. And I wanted to obviously treat them with their physio, and they ultimately we had to work together to find a way to ensure that they understood what I was saying. So secondly, it's really important that I understood that. And thirdly, I became the head of equalities in the trade union MSF at the time, then became Unite. And in that role, my whole purpose, my raison d'etre, was about taking down barriers for disabled people, whether people had a physical impairment or a hearing impairment. And there was I, talking one thing and not doing another. So I took myself off to night school and I learnt to sign. And it was an incredible experience, and I do recommend it for absolutely everybody to learn to sign. Not only did I have lots of fun and laugh at myself, but also it meant I could create new friendships, had new opportunities, and I have to say, throughout my life, I have found it incredibly useful. I've been at meetings where there have been non-hearing people, and I've been able to sign, to interpret for them. It's not perfect, and I'm very rusty now, but at least it's provided access to people, given them the opportunity to access the meeting. But there are some more fundamental issues why we need to ensure that we're signing in our country and to make that a universal opportunity. And that lies with the social and economic opportunities for people with a hearing impairment, but also, if we think about young people in particular, the fact that there are barriers between them and their potential friends, we've got to remove those barriers. It is absolutely right that we put the investment in to give those people those children a real opportunity. Well, I'm glad to say that I could one day communicate with my neighbours when I lived in Norwich, and we were able to build a really strong friendship, and as a result of me being able to sign. But what about those people that just don't have those opportunities? So I just want to talk on some of the ways that it can open up opportunities. But before I do, I just want to say this also has universal benefits. So I gave an example of a meeting, but also I've been in the supermarket with a non-hearing person, and they didn't understand what the cashier was saying, so I was able to sign and break down those barriers. Believe it or not, when I've been outdoor knocking, it has also meant that I can talk to people about politics, so that's been good too.
Would the honourable member give way?
I'm happy to give way.
I will hold my hands up and say, although I learned a little bit of sign as a teacher, I am very much looking forward to the classes the honourable member is going to organise. I think as members of Parliament, I'm actually feeling quite ashamed that if a deaf person was to come to one of my surgeries, how would I communicate with them? So I think we need to set the example. This is about children, but I think we're all sitting here reflecting on ourselves as well. True. So thank you for making such a powerful point.
Yeah, I thank my honourable friend. I too am looking forward to coming along to these classes. Absolutely.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Just to get in on this, on behalf of the All Party Group, I have researched with IPSA. IPSA will fund teaching classes. I've asked the UK Council of Deafness to identify tutors who would be able to come in. Getting colleagues together is always very difficult with diaries, but given that we can claim it against legitimate expenses because we are serving our constituents who, as has been very well described by the honourable friend from York, this is something we ought to be doing, and the House authorities will help us do it, so we should get on with it.
For making that point, but it really is life transforming, because ultimately you can share so much with somebody once you're able to communicate, as we know, with verbalised languages, the difference that makes. Well, British Sign Language is the first British language of 70,000 people, and we must always remember that and to ensure that's accessible. I've also signed at church, and I have to say, in standing in front of a church, it can be a bit nerve-wracking, but over time, I just found it brought real meaning into the words that we sung as well and spoke. So real benefit there personally as well as broader. And of course, we've seen now with the kind of mainstreaming in the media, with the Oscars and the new film starring Maisie Slime, what a role model she is for young girls and young people in the benefit of sign language. So why should it be on the national curriculum? Well, if we had a signing nation, what a difference it would be. If we think about baby sign, first of all, baby sign, babies learn to communicate first through signing and gesture before they can verbalise. So immediately you could get quicker communication with babies, a real advantage, and it is taught in some places. Also, we want to ensure that children can grow up in mainstream education without having barriers. And we know that there are links clearly between British Sign Language and Makatong, although they're not the same language, but there are some signs which translate, so it will again be more inclusive in enabling disabled children to be part of that wider learning community. Children are quick learners, so that is really the time to learn a new language, and British Sign Language is it's a difficult language, I will grant you that, but it's an expressive language, and children will absolutely grasp that. But it's about integration, it's about not being different, it's about having the same opportunities, it's about having friends, it's about being able to study alongside your peers, it's about building an inclusive culture and society. And as children grow up, it is about social inclusion, it is about access to jobs, it is about life, it is about relationships, it is about saying you are no different to anybody else, and we're going to take those barriers down. It is also important that we recognise the qualifications, and why differentiate? So GCSE is the standard qualification which is recognised, and therefore we need to ensure that it does fit in, not with the MVQs levels, which I've worked my way through, but the GCSEs, because I think that absolutely puts it back into the mainstream of our education system. But also, later in life, we know that hearing loss is a massive issue that people face in our country. And if people have those skills to sign, that could just open up new forms of communication amongst older people. Perhaps if you lose your speech because you've had a stroke, again, you'll be able to sign in order to be able to continue communication. So I think there is real benefits for later life as well by ensuring that there is access. Now, in York, in my own city, the college and York St John University, between them, they do offer up to level 3, but as well as there being a national shortage of interpreters, they say there's a national shortage of tutors as well, and we need to obviously encourage people to see that as a worthy profession and something to go into in the future. So just in conclusion, a few points I want to make to the Minister. The first was to see if he could organise some BSL sessions here in Parliament, but I see my honourable friend has already got that in hand, but perhaps some dialogue would be of real benefit so that the Minister can demonstrate how it can provide open opportunities for children in school, and it would be good to join up those agendas together, because we need to shift the agenda here. Whilst I'm really welcome having an interpreter or 2 interpreters throughout this debate, why not all debates? Why do we bring exclusion because we're just talking about BSL? Because whether we're talking about the economy, it's relevant to people who have a hearing impairment. Whether we're talking about foreign affairs, it's relevant to people with a hearing impairment. So I hope we can start seeing this agenda shift in a real, tangible way. I want to make sure, thirdly, that around this issue of qualifications, that the department now get its gates on and brings up their level playing field to ensure that children, particularly but not exclusively, who have a hearing impairment are just seen. The qualifications are no different to that of their peers, and they can study and pass exams in their first language, not having to just in their second language. And finally, I just want to say, if we put this on the national curriculum right through schooling, what a different kind of society we would have. So this isn't just about the qualifications, this is about cultural change, and the Minister has the opportunity to bring about cultural change today. So I just want to thank all of you in today's debate.
Harold Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. It's a pleasure to serve under your
chairmanship, and I'd first of all like to start by paying tribute to Wayne Barrow, whose work has brought this debate today to the floor of the House. This has been a very consensual debate, and I sometimes think this place works best when we're all pushing for the same thing. So let's hope that there is actually some movement today as a result of this. The member for Blaydon kicked off the debate by paying tribute to Maisie Sly, and it's as the member for, I've forgotten, Enfield Southgate? No, wrong one, Waverton, got it. Apologies. As he pointed out, it is almost probably somebody else has a hand in this, that the debate is coming on the same day as the Oscar win. The member for Blaydon talked about various aspects, but I want to talk again, I stand in as a teacher as well. She talked about the attainment gap, and I think that's really important that we consider. No child should start with education knowing that at the end they're going to have a worse set of results than another child. So we need to make sure that we're taking steps to combat that. There's not yet a GCSE. I would hope that as a result of this debate there will be, and I'll say a little bit more about that. Actually in Scotland we're developing an SQA, Scottish Qualifications Authority, qualification in BSL, so they will actually be able to get certification in Scotland. It seems an appropriate and sensible step that the same happens with the GCSE in England, especially if the work has already been done on this. The member for Enfield Southgate talked about, he's no longer in his place, but he talked about the difficulties of inclusion and social cohesion when people were excluded from society, and I think that's an important point. The member for Waveney talked about the range of languages available at GCSE. I think the range probably took many of us by surprise, but hammers home the fact even more starkly that without a GCSE and BSL, really we're selling a large group of young people short, not just people from the deaf community, but other children as well who may want to pursue a career in that particular area. The member for Hull West talked about the educational benefits to all children in learning BSL. And I liked a phrase she used, the data obsession of school results. And I think that's something rich and something valuable is lost in education when all we're interested in is the results at the end of it. However, she correctly pointed out that unless BSL became a GCSE, it would remain low priority. The member for York Central, I think, shamed us all by her abilities, but also showed by a simple demonstration how barriers are created and how barriers are removed. And I also liked the suggestion of hers about the possibility of older people who are possibly suffering from hearing loss looking at learning sign and BSL as a method of continuing communication with loved ones and in their daily lives. The member for Poplar and Limehouse talked about the work being done in Scotland, and I want to say a bit about this. Obviously, this is an area which doesn't impact Scotland, but all the issues are the same. The issues that are faced by deaf people in Scotland are exactly the same. So the Scottish Government has a national strategy to make Scotland the best place in the world for deaf people. And in 2015, the British Sign Language Scotland Bill was passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament. And the bill promotes the use of British Sign Language and made provision for the preparation and publication of the British Sign Language National Plan for Scotland, which we now have. What was good about this bill was it was passed consensually and unanimously with cross-party support, and let's hope, as I said at the start, we can do the same on this one. I will do.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and I'm sorry that I haven't been able to hear for more of this debate. It's an important one to attend, not least because my mind has been opened by the Cardiff Deaf Centre, by interpreters in my own constituency like Julie Doyle and Tony Evans, and by people like Stuart Parkinson. And they've made very clear to me that we need to be improving services in BSL across the whole of the UK. And so I really wanted to commend what the Scottish Government has done. In Wales, she was probably not aware, but we have the BSL Futures scheme and many other schemes, but we all need to do much more and learn across these islands from each other on how to improve services for deaf people.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. This really is, we often say in this place, look north at what Scotland's doing, but we can look to Wales as well. We can look to many places in this particular area where is good work being done, and we need to be taking that on board. The British Sign Language Scotland Bill required certain authorities to prepare and publish their own British Sign Language plans in connection with the exercise of their functions. So the Act has the potential to have a very positive impact on the lives of the people in Scotland whose first or preferred language is BSL. It provides an opportunity to appreciate and celebrate regional variations, including certain Scottish signs. So we want this variation to flourish. The more that BSL is promoted and celebrated throughout the UK, the more exposure it will receive. And this legislation is only Scottish legislation. Sorry, this legislation is only Scottish legislation, it follows that all of Scotland's regional variations will be included and will be valued, but there's no reason why we couldn't be including regional variations across the UK as well. But the bill also paved the way for the British Sign Language National Plan for Scotland, and it was the first of the kind in the UK. So it aims to ensure that sign language users are fully involved in all aspects of daily and public life north of the border. As part of the plans, major transport hubs such as train stations and airports will be expected to provide important information in BSL, as they would for any other language. Sign language interpreters will also be made more widely across Scotland's public services, making it easier for deaf people to hold senior positions. Sign language has been recognised as a language, an official language in Scotland since 2011. So we hope that more British Sign Language users will be encouraged to become school teachers and share their skills with other people, but also we hope that they will infiltrate into every profession so that people have more access to every aspect of government. The Scottish Government for the primary schools also has a plan called the 1+2 language plan. And this plan requires that every primary school-age child in Scotland has experience of one language, their own native language, whatever that may be, and 2 additional languages. So some places it's French, some places it's Mandarin, some places it's Scottish Gaelic, and in some places it's BSL. And it's been really interesting, the impact that has had, particularly with some children with learning difficulties or with speech and language difficulties, because it's far easier for them to be able to sign than often for them to talk. But our BSL National Plan also sets out 70 actions that ministers will take by 2020 to improve the lives of people who use sign language, and it's been backed by £1.3 million of public funding. I'm not going to go through all 70 actions today, but I'll possibly just highlight a couple of them. First things that Scottish ministers will be asked to make progress on is investigating the level of BSL of teachers and support staff in schools in Scotland. Further developing the SQA award in BSL, which hopefully will come into being very shortly. And as I've said a number of times, we hope that the GCSE will follow suit. Enabling parents who use BSL to be fully involved in their child's education, because one of the things we do know is when parents are part of the deaf community, situations like parents' evenings, situations like even school concerts become quite a difficult situation for them, a difficult experience. But also to expand the teaching of BSL as a language to hearing pupils in schools, but also to improve the experience of students who use BSL when they move from school to college, university, training, or into the world of work. And the final one I will point out is that we hope to ensure that every Scottish Government funded employment and training opportunity is fully accessible to BSL users and that they are properly supported. Just to finish off, I'm just going to quote from Dr. Terry Riley, who is the chair of the British Deaf Association. And he says, the Scottish Government's national plan is a brilliant example for the rest of the United Kingdom to follow. And this is not a case where we are standing gloating and feeling smug. This is only the starting position. There's a lot more to be done. But I hope that the UK Government can follow suit in some of the key objectives of that plan. Our long-term plan, our aim is ambitious. We do want to make Scotland the best place in the world for people whose first language or preferred language is BSL. This means that deaf and deafblind BSL users will be fully involved in daily and public life in Scotland as active, healthy citizens and will be able to make informed choices about every aspect of their lives.
Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. And I want to thank the member for Blaydon for opening up today the debate and securing this very important debate on BSL. I also want to thank Wayne Burrows. I've done a music video with him, I can say. It was a lot of fun, and I look forward to the next one. Maybe me, you and Lizzie can do the next one. That would be really good. And it is about bringing BSL to everybody and in front of everybody. I want to thank the shadow team, the education team, for allowing me to respond on behalf of Her Majesty's opposition today, because it is also to do with equality, but I know it falls into education. But BSL is an issue that's close to my heart, having signed, being the first Member of Parliament to sign a question in the House. And it is an eye-opening experience when you learn to sign. And I want to thank the interpreters who do an amazing job and are doing an amazing job here today, and also the House authorities for making sure that we have a live subtitle feed as well, which we're following in the footsteps of New Zealand and Australia. And I know it wasn't a piece of cake, as they say, but as most things, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So we just need to do it a lot more in this place, and then it will come like nothing. We've heard a lot about the Oscar nominations and the win today, and Silent Child, and Rachel Shenton, who delivered her Oscar speech in British Sign Language, and also Libby, the young girl. I mean, they do say the more what you see, you can be. And the more we see of people signing and communicating, the more we just will take it as a given that it's the right thing to do. We've heard that the Labour Party introduced British Sign Language as a language in its own right in 2003. Now, 15 years later, it is time to take the next steps in regards for equality and users of British Sign Language. It is, in a way, a little bit shocking that British Sign Language isn't a GCSE in schools. When we've heard from the member from Waveney just how many other languages there are, why not British Sign Language? It's a recognised language after all. I mean, it should actually, we should go further and it should be given legal status. And we've also heard from many of the members here today, and the member from Kingston upon Hull and Hessel, that why it should be a GCSE, why it should be recognised as a teacher, and why that's important. And we've heard that the GCSE model is ready to go, and all it needs is sign-off from the Department of Education. I mean, Signature UK has already done all of the work that's needed. It's been successfully piloted for 2 years in 6 schools, and it just highlights why making BSL a GCSE is so important. And some people say to me, why learn BSL? Why should it be? Why is it an official language? And we have heard the member from York Central and the member from Popular and Limehouse have spoken about equality. And then nobody in this place can be against equality. Everybody argues about equality every single time. So equality is equality. If equality matters for one person, it matters for another. Why are we picking and choosing whose equality is more important? Those people who are deaf people deserve to have equality, deserve to have a level playing field, deserve to have British Sign Language as a recognised language and BSL. And the National Deaf Children's Society carried out this comprehensive survey, and it quite clearly showed that young people want to learn BSL. And you have to remember, young people get old, whether we like it or not. Sometimes we don't believe we will ever get old, but young people get old. And as we've heard before, there are thousands of older people who lose their hearing. And I've spoken to older people that say, I wish I'd learned some signing when I was younger, because then I wouldn't feel so isolated. And I think now is the time. We've heard about lots of movements that are happening at the moment. And now is the time for us to remove structural barriers in society. And we need to ensure that more people are taught BSL, and that will remove a structural barrier for deaf people. It will mean that we will not only help them to reach their full potential, but we will also help their mental health as well. Lots of deaf people suffer from mental health issues. So a lot of people are trapped in a world of silence. When the honourable member, my honourable friend for York, signed the beginning of her speech, there was complete silence in this room. Just imagine if your whole life was lived in that silence everywhere you go, and you could not communicate with anybody. That's the difference that learning sign language makes to people who are deaf. I mean, approximately 1 in 6 people suffer from a hearing loss, and that's a lot of people in our country. And I want to just speak briefly as to why I learnt BSL. The first time I spent a lot of time with deaf people was when I was at college, and there was 2 people who were deaf. And I learnt my name, and I learnt to say hello and other little bits. And I always felt, like my honourable friend for York, that who is the person that could bring down that barrier? Is it the person that can't speak, or is it the person that can't sign? And I realised it was me that couldn't sign. And so when I started working, and there was a deaf person at work, I decided to go to evening classes and learn to sign. So I went for, I think, 2, maybe 3 years to learn how to sign. I'm rusty now because it was a long time ago. But I learned how to sign. And I met a great friend at work, and we signed. We got ourselves into a lot of trouble, but it was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of people, and they never knew about it, which was really quite a useful tool probably to have in Parliament. And it opens doors. It opens doors for a lot of people. It opened doors for me. I made new friends, and I make new friends wherever I go. Can be in the supermarket, or on the buses or the trains when an announcement's made and people don't know what's going on, and you're able to sign, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just finger spelling what's going on. You can learn as a hearing person to bridge that gap with a deaf person, and that's important. And I think that, as I said, now is the time to remove the structural barriers. The Labour Party has said that we would, if we were in government, have a national plan for England. We will have a BSL Act. We will have a consultation and a debate to make sure that we take all the good practices that are happening in Scotland and Wales and elsewhere, and there's many other countries around the world that's implemented an act. And I'm not asking the Minister to go as far as the Labour Party. That's a lovely sign for the Labour Party. I'm not asking the Minister to go as far as the Labour Party today, but when the Minister rises to his feet, I would like the Minister to reflect that the Department for, as we've heard before, the Department for Work and Pensions has reported and highlighted that there's a shortage in sign interpreters, resulting in higher costs for things like access to work. And we need more access to work, not less. We need to invest in access to work so that deaf people can reach their full potential. And we need to invest. And the way to do that is to show commitment. So I do hope when the Minister gets to his feet that he will have some good news for the deaf community and BSL users. And I am asking the Minister to please make BSL a GCSE. Thank you.
Call on the Minister to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr Austin. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Blaydon for both securing this debate and for a very powerful opening speech. And can I add my congratulations to both the filmmakers and Maisie Sly for their work and success at the Oscars last night with their film Silent and Child. While I haven't seen the film yet, it does raise important issues about the isolation that can arise from being born deaf in a hearing world and highlights the difference that can be brought about by learning to communicate effectively. The government has recognised British Sign Language as a language in its own right since 2003. British Sign Language is a vital method of communication for many people and the first or preferred language for an estimated 70,000 deaf people in the United Kingdom. And of course, many hearing people, such as the Honourable Member for Brent Central and the Honourable Member for York Central, choose to learn BSL in order to communicate more effectively with hearing impaired people in everyday life. And I enjoyed very much the Honourable Member for York Central's speech during the course of this debate. And so the government understands, and I understand, the passion that many organisations and individuals have in wanting BSL to be included as part of the national curriculum. The reformed national curriculum introduced in 2014 places a much greater focus on the core academic knowledge that pupils need for success in an ever more globalised world. And this core body of knowledge is not expected to change significantly over time. But the national curriculum is just one element in the wide-ranging education of every child that makes up the broader school curriculum. And when we reformed the national curriculum, our expert panel made a very clear distinction between the national curriculum and the school curriculum. And we wanted the national curriculum to be kept within a certain size to enable schools to develop a broader school curriculum. Now, there is enough time and space in the school day each week, each term and year to expand beyond the specifications found in the national curriculum. And we are unapologetically ambitious, Mr Austin, for every child, no matter what their background, no matter their prior attainment or their educational needs. The best possible education for adult life in modern Britain is one that equips children and young people with the knowledge they need to succeed. And our reforms have led to the attainment gap between children from disadvantaged backgrounds and their more advantaged peers, closing by an astonishing 10% since 2011. And to do this, we ensured that the national curriculum is rigorous. We looked at curriculum design in the most successful education jurisdictions across the globe and benchmarked what our children are expected to learn at different stages. And while setting stretching expectations for the knowledge and skills that each child should be taught, we have given teachers more professional freedom to choose how to teach that material and how to assess it in the classroom. We will continue to increase support for teachers to deliver this stretching curriculum effectively, including by encouraging greater use of evidence-based teaching methods to raise standards and cut unnecessary workload. Now, we have a responsibility to ensure that we are supporting teachers, reducing workload, and allowing our reforms to bed in and take effect. Making changes to the curriculum causes increased workload for teachers. And now that we have a high-quality curriculum with stretching and rigorous assessments to match, we want to minimise further change. So the department's programme of work on teacher workload aims to enable teachers to focus on teaching and their own professional development. Now, while we believe that BSL is an important and worthwhile area of study, we don't have plans to change the national curriculum for schools to make teaching BSL mandatory for maintained schools, particularly as 2/3 of secondary schools now have academy status and are not obliged to follow any part of the national curriculum, whether we revise it or not. Now, schools may choose to offer BSL as part of their wider school curriculum or as a varied programme of extracurricular activities, and some may also offer accredited. I just want to make this point. Some may, and then I will give way to the honourable member. Some may also offer accredited BSL qualifications to support pupils' achievement in the language. And for people who wish to develop their ability to communicate effectively with those with a hearing impairment in everyday situations, Level 1 and 2 qualifications have the greatest take-up, and they already exist. The Level 1 and 2 qualifications currently offered by the Institute of British Sign Language, Signature and ABC Awards enable people to engage in routine conversations about real life and daily experiences and develop a wider grasp of grammar to deal with non-routine exchanges. And for those who wish, there are opportunities to develop practices in BSL further into Level 3 and Level 4, and even Level 6, equivalent to a degree. And individuals who take these qualifications might wish to enter a career working professionally with deaf people, such as an interpreter or a teacher. I give way to the honourable member.
Thank you. And I'm quite upset about the tone of the Minister's message after a debate where we kind of thought we were getting a bit of movement. And as a teacher, a former teacher, I want to put on record that I completely disagree with his statements regarding teachers feeling supported at this present time. And I think it's very sad, and I saw people shaking their heads over there, that once again, this government prioritises exams and those results of the curriculum rather than inclusion and providing a diverse curriculum that benefits our entire society. And yeah, a shame.
Well, she interrupted my speech before I concluded my argument, so if the honourable member would like to just hold her impatience a little longer. Now, this week, Mr Austin, we celebrate National Apprenticeship Week, which celebrates the success of apprenticeships across England. BSL is now an alternative to a Level 1 and Level 2 qualification in English when studying an apprenticeship, providing the opportunity for apprentices to achieve a qualification in their own primary language. This enables those who use BSL to complete their apprenticeship without having to achieve another English qualification, such as GCSE or functional skills. Now, my honourable friend, the member for Waveney, referred to GCSEs in Urdu and other community languages, and the honourable member for Poplar and Limehouse referred also to Russian and Japanese. Now, honourable members will be aware that we had a very real struggle with the awarding organisations, the exam boards, to ensure that these small cohort GCSEs continued. Ultimately, we are dependent on the exam boards, those accredited by Ofqual to offer GCSEs, to be willing to offer any further GCSEs. I give way to the honourable member.
For giving way. Before he was moving off the answer to my honourable friend and giving further clarification on this point, will he be referring in the rest later in his speech to that which has been raised by a number of colleagues, that the Department for Education has already piloted a GCSE for British Sign Language, which is ready to go in, and why the department isn't in a position or isn't able or willing to actually validate that for schools that do want to teach the qualification that way rather than at NVQ level?
Yes, well, the Honourable Member for Poplar, again, just preempts what I was just about to come to. I was about to come to that very point, but he makes an important point, and I will address it. So Honourable Members should be aware that of the 4 GCSE exam boards operating in this country, OCR, one of the major exam boards, has recently stopped providing any language GCSEs at all, including French, Spanish and German, which are not small cohort GCSEs. Now, the Honourable Member raised the issue of the GCSE that has been prepared by the awarding organisation's signature, and that we have seen that draft specification, and it has been tested in some schools. But there is an established and rigorous process in place to accredit GCSEs, and that specification has not been through that process. Now, a number of further steps will be required to develop it into a GCSE, including developing broad and deep subject content, working with subject experts. It would also need to meet Ofqual's assessment criteria and be accredited by Ofqual. And Signature itself, if it were to be the awarding organisation that offered the qualification, it itself would need to be accredited as a GCSE awarding organisation by Ofqual and be subject to their regulatory oversight. So it's not a simple process of saying this qualification is already done and dusted and ready to run. There's a huge number of steps that have to be gone through. And as somebody who presided over the reforms to GCSE since 2010, the new GCSEs in English and Maths were ready for first teaching in September 2015, and the next set of GCSEs were ready for first teaching in 2016 with exams in June 2018. So these GCSE reform processes and accreditation processes take a long time, and they are not simple the accreditation is not a simple thing to acquire from Ofqual, who often send them back for further drafting before they're prepared to accredit them. I'll give way to the Honourable Member for Poplar, then I'll give way to the Honourable Member for you.
I'm grateful to the Minister for that further clarification. Can he say, given the hoops that have to be jumped through to actually get to a position where there will be a GCSE available, is the department in a position to say it supports the additional efforts to get to that point, or is it not the role of the department to actually encourage that? Where do we go from here to actually get to a position whereby there will be a GCSE in British Sign Language validated by the Department of Education that can be taught and can be examined in schools?
Well, we've been clear that we want schools to have a period of stability, and so we have said that there are to be no new GCSEs or A-levels for a period of time. Now, it doesn't mean to say that in the longer term we won't consider new subjects being considered for GCSEs, but it's very important after the hugely extensive reforms to GCSEs and A-levels that schools have a period of stability. And I have a responsibility to schools to enable them to have that period of stability, which is what they have been asking for from us. I'll give way to the Honourable Member for York Central, then I'll give... to the Honourable Member, then I'll give way to the Honourable Member for York Central.
Thank you, Minister. Do you not agree with me, though, that what we examine shows as a society what we value? I mean, it's very clear for everybody who wishes to read it what you yourself value with the changes to the GCSEs that you have introduced. But what message is this sending out to people if we're not even going to consider having GCSE, having British Sign Language as a GCSE? What does this say about what we value as a society?
Well, I would argue that not everything that is taught in schools needs to be a GCSE. There are plenty of very valuable qualifications that we allow to be taught in schools under Section 90, called the Section 96 list, that are very valuable, have very valuable subject content, that aren't sufficiently broad to qualify as a GCSE, but nonetheless we encourage to be taught in our schools. And as I have said, we do value BSL as a subject, and we would encourage schools that wish to do so to teach BSL in school. And there are a number of Level 1 and Level 2, and indeed Level 3 and 4 qualifications, which schools are permitted to teach in their schools. I give way to the Honourable Member for York Central.
I'm grateful to the Minister, but I'm really struggling. For the Minister myself, English is our first language, I take it, and we have the right to sit a qualification at GCSE level in our first language. If you're hearing impaired, BSL could be your first language, and yet we're denying people with a hearing impairment that opportunity. And therefore there is a real inequality which is being built into the system, and that's why I would urge the Minister, this isn't about adding another subject to the curriculum. This is about attaining equality for people who are hearing impaired.
Well, as I've said, we do value the BSL. There will be a huge number of steps to go through for the BSL qualification to be accredited as a GCSE. And having been through the process, it is it is not a simple process of getting those qualifications accredited. There are existing level 2, which is the same level as the GCSEs are level 2. There are existing BSL qualifications available of high quality that can be taught in schools. It's not a GCSE, but as I said, there are many subjects taught in schools that are not GCSEs, which are nonetheless valued by schools and by those who take those qualifications. Now, we recognise, Mr. Austin, that some who wish to take a qualification in BSL will do so in order to communicate with a family member or a friend. Indeed, many of those who have the most need are hearing parents of a deaf child, and that's why we understand that early access to language is essential to help children learn and thrive. It's vital that families have the support they need to communicate with their children. Now, the department has provided funding for the development of a support guide to help parents of deaf children. Families or carers may also be eligible for support in learning sign language. The department has provided funding for the iSign project to develop a family sign language program, which is available online. We believe that all young people should be helped to achieve their potential, regardless of their background or circumstances. Over 21,000 children with a hearing impairment are supported at school, and we are proud that 93% of hearing impaired children are supported to attend mainstream school. Now, pupils who use sign language are generally provided support at school through specialist teaching assistants and through specialist teachers of the deaf. But we don't prescribe how schools should support pupils with a hearing impairment. We've made it clear in the Special Educational Needs and Disability Code of Practice that all schools must use their best endeavours to make suitable provision available for all children of school age with special educational needs or disabilities. The reasonable adjustments duty for schools and local authorities includes a duty to provide supporting aids and services for disabled pupils, and these could include things like radio aids or communication support workers. And in addition, the local authority can support parents and children by developing the knowledge they need to communicate effectively. When the time comes for pupils to take qualifications, schools and colleges are responsible for ensuring that reasonable adjustments are also made for pupils to help make exams more accessible. And common arrangements include extra time, the use of scribes and readers, and the use of word processors. Indeed, more deaf children are leaving school with good GCSEs than ever, and we want them to continue to aspire to reach their full potentials. And statistics show that attainment in English and maths for this group has been improving in recent years, and the proportion of children with a hearing impairment achieving a standard pass at grade 4 or above in English and maths GCSE has increased by 6 percentage points compared with passes at C or above in 2011, and that is an improvement we're very proud of. I'll give way to the member.
I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to make a point to the Minister that it's wonderful that deaf children are exceeding in, they are doing well in their attainment. But this isn't equal opportunities. And surely that is a government's responsibility to be delivering equal opportunities for all of our children and all of our people in the society. And I just don't feel that the government are taking responsibility for this. We've heard that it's teachers, we've heard that it's schools, we've heard that it can be local government, but what about the government?
Well, as I explained when it comes to the GCSE, first of all, for the national curriculum, 2/3 of schools, as I've said, have academy status, which means they're not obliged to follow the national curriculum, and that trend is increasing, and the number of schools that are acquiring academy status increases every month, and so they're not obliged. I'll give way in a moment to follow the national curriculum. I've also set out the very real practical issues regarding any new GCSE, that it has to go through an accreditation process. It has to be provided by an awarding organisation that is itself accredited as a GCSE provider. And as I pointed out, we've had a real struggle with the awarding organisations in providing language GCSEs, particularly the community languages. We had a huge battle with them. We ended up having to move a whole raft of community language GCSEs from OCR to the other awarding organisations. And so ultimately, we can only provide GCSEs that the exam boards, which are independent, wish to provide. And as I've said, there is a draft specification provided by Signature, but that process, they would then have to go through the process of having that GCSE accredited by Ofqual and themselves to be accredited by Ofqual as a GCSE provider. These are the very real issues confronting any minister in the Department for Education when it comes to new GCSEs, because the system, the legislation passed in this House, ensuring that we have GCSEs that are on a par with one another and which hold standards over time, have led to us deciding to have a very powerful regulator, which is absolutely right, to make sure we maintain standards. And then that process has to be gone through by anybody that wishes to introduce a new GCSE. In addition to that, the third area is that we want schools to have a period of stability, because this is not the only request for a new GCSE that we are receiving. There are other requests for other GCSEs. Schools have asked for a period of stability. That period of stability will be for a short period, and after that we can consider whether new GCSEs or new A-levels can be introduced. I'll give way to the Honourable Member.
I thank the Minister for giving way, but and whilst I accept that, no, not all schools do have to teach the national curriculum, because what exists isn't actually a national curriculum, it's an examination curriculum. The school curriculum is built around the examinations which children take. And I'm sorry, but I disagree with the point made about there's a wider school curriculum. There isn't a wider school curriculum. Schools would long for there to be a wider school curriculum, but the reforms that this government has made has squeezed out and has narrowed it down so tightly to being just solely based around the examination. So if you don't give British Sign Language an examination, then it just won't be counted and it won't be taught.
Well, there are examinations in BSL they're produced by Signature, produced by ABC, that are level 1 or level 2 qualifications. So exams do exist in BSL, and they are on the Section 96 list, and they can be taught in schools. So those qualifications do exist. I don't accept her caricature of our school system. The school curriculum is very wide, and the most successful schools in the state sector do have a very wide curriculum. They offer plenty of sport, they offer plenty of music and plenty of arts curriculum. Art and music are compulsory to the end of Key Stage 3, and the most successful schools that are most successful academically in their exams that the Honourable Member dismisses, those are the schools that also have a very broad and balanced curriculum beyond the GCSE. And we made it very clear in our reforms to the national curriculum that there was to be a distinction between the national curriculum, which focuses on those core academic subjects, and the school curriculum, which goes beyond those core academic subjects and includes sport and a whole raft of artistic and other subjects that are hugely important, things like RSC, sexual relationship education, PSHE, citizenship, and so on, that are hugely important in developing a rounded person. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
To the Minister, what I'm struggling to understand is why the Minister can't determine and ask an exam awarding body to go away and do the work to ensure that a GCSE in British Sign Language could be put on stream, and then to be able to then integrate that into the school system, by which time the schools clearly would have had their period of stability and then will be able to teach this as part of its core curriculum.
I'm always very happy to have meetings and discussions on these issues, and I continue to have discussions with people who want to bring forward a whole raft of new subject content into our schools, and I'm very happy to have the meeting with my honourable friend next week to discuss this very issue. So we always keep these issues under review. What I've set out today is the realistic challenges facing the school system in this country, and I'm putting on record in an open and transparent way where we are on issues of new GCSEs coming into our system. And that's what I've sought to do today, and I hope, Mr. Austin, on that basis, I will conclude my remarks. Thank you.
To wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I start by thanking all the honourable members who have made a contribution to this debate today. Most of it fairly upbeat. It's a shame about the ending, but we'll come on to that. So I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Waveney for his support for the cause. The Honourable Member for Jim I'll get the hang one day. The Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse, who is Chair of the APPG on Deafness. The Honourable Member for Hull West and Hessle East. For York Central, who so powerfully reminded us that it is we who are erecting barriers, not people who have hearing difficulties or deafness. I think a very important point to remember. I'd like to thank the member for Glasgow North West for her contribution and for Brent Central as well. There were some really interesting and exciting points, all of them supporting the need for us to be more inclusive and to reach out and include people with, young people with deafness in particular, who we're talking about today. So then we come to the Minister's comments, and I have to say, Minister, I was really disappointed. I did ask you to see if you could go further than you had in your written response, and I'm disappointed in the fact that it's not been able to, we've not been able to go further today. I've heard all of the reasons that you've given, but what I would say, Minister, is what we need is a can-do approach. We have a problem and we need to find a way around it so that all our young people can take part in school activities, but also life in the wider community through the development of BSL GCSEs and the inclusion of BSL as a curriculum subject. And I remain convinced, having been a governor in a number of schools, that actually it's really difficult to find time to do it. Although it's allowed, it's really difficult to find the time to do it. So I think I look forward to your further discussions with the APPG, and I hope that there will be a change in the future on both including it in the national curriculum and in recognising a GCSE qualification, because I don't think that Wayne and his mates and Erin and other young people are going away. I think that you're going to be hearing much more about this issue in the next few days. And actually, I'm reminded that next week is Sign Language Week. And I think there's going to be a lot of going around on the kind of Twitterati and in public about this. So I think you can watch out for a lot more connection, a lot more questions from the public as well as from members on this issue. And I want to just finish by reminding us that we've spent a lot of time talking about the national curriculum, talking about GCSEs, but this is all about allowing deaf young people to be included in activities, included in school life, and just to have some fun, like Wayne and his mates do. So I'd like to thank honourable members, and we will be coming back to this issue, I'm sure.
Or the question is that this House has considered e-petition 200,000 relating to British Sign Language being part of the national curriculum. As many are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. And before members leave, I just want to formally thank the interpreters who've been translating this into BSL, and the people who've been organising the live simultaneous interpretation on TV. And I think it's in order to thank the officers of the House who've made all of this possible as well. And having said that, order, order. The sitting is suspended for 1 minute. The sitting stands adjourned. Was that all right?